10 have claimed they could spend more without taxing us more, leaving the Chancellors in number 11 to balance the books. All too often they've failed. Now we're living with the consequences. In this series I've been finding out how we got here and examining the demands on the people who have to make the nation's sums add up. Right now the economy is facing the tightest squeeze in decades, and it hurts. We put pressure on the Chancellor to spend more and more, and then we're incredibly resistant to paying more tax to pay for it. So why can't politicians protect the have-nots by taxing the have-lots? It may not be that simple. Taxes are, for the very rich, effectively voluntary.
I think taxes are totally voluntary for the very rich.
What about those who are not rich, but are certainly better off?
It's not that I don't want to pay anymore, but I feel like we haven't got any more to give.
And why can't they simplify the bewilderingly complex taxes on what we spend and buy?
That one doesn't pay. That one does pay VAT. Why? Don't ask me, I'm not the Chancellor.
Why don't Chancellors tax us enough to pay for all the things that we say we want them to spend money on? Why do the nation's sums fail to add up so often over our history? Tonight, the trouble with tax on your money and how they spend it. Let's begin at the beginning. What is tax? We know what it is, don't we? It's the government chasing us for our hard-earned cash. Are you a taxpayer? Yeah. Could I have £5? Because there's somebody over here who needs it more than you. I'm just trying to get money off taxpayers to give to some other people. Are you happy to pay a bit more? You probably pay your taxes already, don't you? Yeah, too much?
Too much.
I wondered if I could just have some of your money to give someone who needs it. Would that be all right?
I need it myself.
You need it yourself?
Yeah.
Where am I going to get it from then? Manchester's full of good people, but giving money to total strangers is perhaps asking a bit much. Though that's what politicians do. Do you mind, there's somebody in need over there. Could I have £5 to give it to you?
I've just got enough for myself at the minute.
Have you? You don't want to give it to the lady over there?
I can't afford to.
She needs it, she's got children.
I can't afford to, I need it.
And now politicians want us to fork out even more to pay for the country's huge liabilities. I just need a bit of extra money, is that all right? It's very expensive, the police, we've got to pay for the schools, hospitals, there's a war on. So have you got £5 each maybe, could you?
The governments generally just waste it, don't they?
Yeah.
They just fritter it away on wars and giving it away to idlers who don't work.
Who here can I get to give me some more money, do you think?
People who have more money.
Who are they? What do I have to look for? People in suits? So I'm very sorry to stop you in your lunch break.
Not at all.
Have you got your wallet on you?
Yes.
There are quite a lot of people in need here and a lot of public services need to be paid for. I wonder if you could just give me some more money for them.
I'm afraid I can't afford it.
No?
I think it's a familiar story you will be hearing.
I don't seem to be able to persuade anybody to part with their hard-earned cash so I can hand it on to somebody else. Which is a bit of a problem for governments, really, because taxes are the way that they take from one and give it to another, maybe even back to us when we're unable to work, or sick, or old. And if a nice guy like me can't do it, imagine how much harder it is for politicians.
Well, the public obviously want to spend money on very worthwhile causes that either affect them or other people. The public also don't want to pay for it. They believe the government can find other people to pay for it.
Talking about tax and politics is a bit like talking about sex in public. You know, everybody knows it's their own, but, you know, they don't like to talk about it too much. And I think people tend to be so cynical now about what government does. It's always going to be a difficult conversation, but, you know, perhaps it's a good time to have it.
A good time because we're living way beyond our means. Last year, the government raised £549 billion in taxes. A huge amount, but much less than they were spending. Stimulating growth is one way to close the gap, but how else could they raise more to make the books add up?
Remember that number? £549 billion, the amount raised in taxes last year? Well, three big taxes raised more than 60% of that. The big daddy is income tax. It generated £152 billion. But since politicians have been a little afraid to put the rate up for many years, they've looked instead to another tax on our incomes. It's not called a tax, it's national insurance, and it raised more than most people think, £97 billion last year. The amount raised by VAT, value-added tax, has doubled in the past 30 years. It raised £86 billion. Since then, of course, the rate's gone up. No other taxes raise anything like as much as those three. Businesses pay in all sorts of different ways. They pick up more than half the bill in national insurance, they pay rates and other taxes, and then there's corporation tax, which generated £43 billion last year. Next comes the little guys, although it probably doesn't feel like that a lot of the time. Add fuel tax, for example, to the so-called sin taxes on booze and fags. Last year the government raised £46 billion. Council tax, which a lot of people don't like, added just £26 billion to the nation's coffers last year. And then there are all those little ones that we like to curse. Stamp duty when you buy a house, £6 billion. Inheritance tax, £3 billion. And you can't even fly away from the problem without paying tax on that plane ticket, £2 billion. So short of inventing an entirely new tax, there are your options.
Instead of deciding which tax should go up, many start by saying who should pay more tax. Their answer's simple: the rich, like this man.
Okay, so we're ready for departure if you are. I'm happy, yeah, thank you very much.
John Caldwell has all the trappings of enormous wealth. A helicopter, a yacht, and a vast mansion.
That feel good looking at that? It's a fabulous house, isn't it? Lovely. I've always loved Jacobean architecture, Elizabethan Jacobean.
Caldwell's a great British success story. His Phones for You mobile phone business created thousands of jobs, and when he sold it, netted him £1.5 billion.
How does a lad from a terraced house with an outdoor loo here in Stoke feel about living in that 50-room mansion a few minutes away? Well, of course I feel lucky and privileged, but by the same time I don't sort of look at it and it takes my breath away, because it sort of took me 35 years to get there.
In some countries, the super rich have asked to pay more tax to help clear their country's debts. Here, billionaires like John Caldwell aren't keen to follow suit.
How much can you tax the rich before they vote with their feet and decide to leave the country, and then the revenue to the exchequer is reduced rather than increased?
And have you got a sense of how much tax you've been paying in the last few years?
I've got a very great sense of the tax I've paid, but I don't know whether you could even stand the number.
Go on.
Well, if we go from what I've already paid since selling the business, and then include what is due and going to be paid, we are definitely talking of around about £280 million.
Caldwell's proud that that sum could pay to build 14 brand new secondary schools. But he doesn't like paying his tax one little bit.
You choose to give quite a bit of cash now to charities. Why do you feel better about doing that than paying your tax bill?
Do you know, there's no comparison. I'm sorry. It takes my breath away, to be honest, because we run our charity and all my charitable works like a business, and we make every last penny really count. That is incredibly satisfying, and because I do it voluntarily, it's even more satisfying. What is satisfying about giving 50% of your income to the government and then having it frittered away in many areas that you strongly disagree with?
Few people like taxes, no matter how rich they are. Parliament echoes to the sound of past struggles to prize more from the wallets of the wealthy. The biggest tax of them all was invented specifically to target them. 200 years ago, like today, Britain faced a mighty big bill. The Prime Minister William Pitt decided the rich should stump up. You can blame him for income tax. Its troubled history starts here in the Parliamentary Archive.
So, we're in the original Act room and the original income taxes right here. This is the original Income Tax Act of 1799.
So if I bin that, I can get rid of having to pay any tax?
I fear it doesn't quite work like that. If I just take it off the shelf.
You can live in hope, can't you?
Indeed.
This is it?
This is it. This is the original.
At the time?
As written out in Parliament while the bill was being passed.
When first introduced, income tax was solely for the wealthy. Those earning over £200 a year would pay 10% of their earnings.
Most gracious Sovereign, we, your Majesty's most dutiful and loyal subjects, the Commons of Great Britain in Parliament assembled, for granting to His Majesty an aid and contribution for the prosecution of the war. This great act was introduced to deal with what's now a familiar problem, a whopping great budget deficit, but in particular to deal with the costs of war. And because the idea was so unpopular, then as well as now, the writers of this document convinced themselves that it would be temporary.
But of course, income tax is still with us. Over the years, more and more people have had to pay it, and time and again when things got tough, politicians turned to the wealthy. Back in 1973, hammering the rich was thought to be a surefire vote winner. Just before an election, Labour's shadow chancellor made this prediction.
I warn you, there are going to be howls of anguish from the 80,000 rich people who are rich enough to pay over 75% on the last slice of their income.
Dennis Healey boasted that he'd squeeze the rich till the pips squeaked. At the Treasury, he went further, raising the top rate of income tax to 83%. It was in fact the Stones, not the Pips, that did the squeaking. They and other celebrities complained bitterly.
Basically, I mean, we have to give all the money to the revenue, bless them. I mean, they should really be promoting the tour. I mean, they're doing very well out of it.
The Rolling Stones could avoid their soaring tax bill by rolling out of Britain, along with Rod Stewart, Michael Caine and countless other wealthy people, leaving Labour to be branded the High Tax Party. By the end of the 70s, a new Tory government came to office promising lower income tax for all. The basic rate was cut to 30%, the top rate to 60%. But it was the next dramatic step which changed everything.
One day, one speech, one budget transformed the politics of tax. It was March the 15th, 1988, when Margaret Thatcher's Chancellor, Nigel Lawson, cut not just the basic rate of income tax, but slashed the top rate too. There were cries of shame from within the Commons, but the echoes died remarkably quickly.
A reduction in the top rates of income tax can, over time, result in a higher and not a lower yield to the exchequer.
We had a system of taxation as a result of Labour governments putting up the top rates of income tax and Conservative governments not reducing them again. So we had an absurdly high top rate of income tax, which was having very great ill effects.
Excessive rates of income tax destroy enterprise, encourage avoidance, and drive talent to more hospitable shores overseas. I propose to abolish all the higher rates of income tax above 40%.
There was uproar in the House. It was quite extraordinary. It was, in fact, the only budget there's ever been in which the House of Commons the sitting had to be suspended.
This major reform.
Order! Order!